This conference will now be recorded.
Commissioner call, and Dr. Powell texted me a couple minutes ago saying he would be joining us in a little bit. Here's something. Okay. When you guys get Dr. Powell down there, will you let me know?
Sure.
Okay. At this point, I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve, motion by to approve the agenda, and second by Commissioner Hall. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Next, I'll entertain a motion about the minutes.
I'll move to adopt the presented.
Motion by Commissioner Hall to approve the minutes of May 20th, 21, and second by Spiritu. Any discussion or debate? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval, signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay. You start. Yep.
We'll start with my operational report. Sorry, I'm fighting technology at the same time. And make sure we don't miss out on our presentation. Okay. So air service last month in May, we were again up just a little bit at 6621 passengers boarded in May versus the 690 in the middle of the COVID pandemic last year. You look at year to date, the schedule did not change much coming up in July. Really just for July 4th, there's some adjustment because it would typically be a slow day. So they're ending the day a little early, which is all they're doing. Cutting off one flight to Dallas, Phoenix is coming. Next slide. Operations are still running pretty steady. As you can see, we're doing better than last year, 2000 versus 1400. Year to date is a little bit behind last year. I think we wound up with a little extra because of all the aircraft arriving with COVID, coupled with the short debt that we had with the Navy. Of course, we had the same thing this year, but I think they wound up spending a little more time in the air last year. We also had, I forgot to mention, we had Textron just finished up yesterday with Cessna's new twin turbo aircraft. That actually, they had a very successful trip. The aircraft, in my mind, because I'm an airplane geek, but, is really interesting because it's the replacement or upgrade from the Caravan. So their market for that aircraft is FedEx, Amazon, those folks. But the difference between it and the Caravan, everything is basically loaded manually. Boxes and all go in and get netted down so they don't move around the airplane. The difference with the Sky Couriers, it's large enough to put the smaller carriers in there that you see that go into the airliner now, the big ground top ones. It'll take about the half size one that you just slide it straight in. So the advantage for cargo folks that are doing that is everything going to Roswell can get loaded in Memphis or St. Louis or Louisville or wherever, and then it goes through their system, just moving the box. They don't have to take every individual box out of the carrier, and that carrier will slide right into that twin engine aircraft and be delivered here or wherever. So they did water testing and they did freight testing, very successful. Talking about coming back maybe sometime later this year, August or September. Revenues are also continuing to run about the same as they have. Both fees are still up a little bit over last year. Attribute that to these airliners going out. We're losing a few every week. Compared to May 20, you can see that everything was coming in rather than going out so much. For the most part, there we didn't. We're way ahead for 21 versus. Landing fees also, same thing. We're a little below what we were last year because all of that was coming in. Parking fees, you can see that number starting to go down. If you remember, it's been in the mid 80s. mid 180s for the last several months. As these aircraft start to leave, we're losing the parking fees on those, but still doing very well at 177,000 per May, topping out 960 for the year over year. We're doing really well.
New rate kicked in January 21 or 2021.
So we're working on that new rate. And I got my day wrong because I was Missouri, but that actually was the 14th, but there's 450 airplanes left on the airfield, even with the folks departing as of 2 days ago. Projects. Really only one coming up in construction pretty shortly. The Armstrong folks brought the contract with them to sign that. The award's been approved, and we need to get that contract signed, get that going. We're negotiating a start date that looks like probably the middle of July at this point. But that's for a full down to the dirt redo of Taxi Alpha and Juliet. That project will entail closing runway 1725 for the entire duration of the project for safety. It won't involve the runway directly other than where the taxiway and the runway meet. That's the point. The equipment and people will be right there on the edge of the runway as they do that project. Runway 321 will remain open for everyone else. And I threw 90 days up there because I couldn't remember. That's about right, isn't it? The 90-day duration on the project. Okay. I was guessing, so I knew I probably wouldn't get it exactly right. But it's not a particularly long project because it's a small one. But it is a $3.4 million project. Because this one combines our entitlement monies and then our supplemental money that we got for 20. So the other project that will be coming along next after this is actually ongoing now. It's the design of our ramp maintenance, where we're going to do crack seal and repairs out here on this concrete, and then wrapping back around to the west side over to the general aviation area. We'll be working on that asphalt as well as working on the shoulder of Taxiway Alpha, where we've got some older asphalt that's starting to rattle and come loose. We'll be putting some oil on that or something to stick it back down. Maybe oil it and roll it. We'll figure out what we need to do.
I just saw something. Just give our copies to you. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I usually take my notes, but
Yeah, I think if you guys,
We probably should just get in the habit of doing that.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And then we talked about it most every meeting. I hope you guys get them, but we just need to.
Because I'm not doing that. Too lazy to do it.
That runs through pretty quick.
On this aspect, is there any way you could wrap it out here in comparison with previous years? I can't correlate May with April, with, you know what I mean? I have no way to follow.
What would you like to see? I mean, last time I kind of did, so last time, of course, was April, and then we did the year over year before, but because of the differences in 19 with the COVID, effect in 20, that was why I did 19. I feel like we're kind of getting past that now, and honestly, that difference is going to continue to be pretty much the same, and the gap will close as we move through 21. But yeah, I'd be happy to do.
Well, I think it is, what you do on that GRT might be what is looking for I get, because I get what you're saying. It goes 3 areas: parking, landing, and fuel flow, and do it with the GRT, because they do like every month, and they'll have a graph so you can see it. So when you guys talked about that.
Just looking at 1 month, this one, can't really
Right.
correlate that with anything else, just determine how well or not.
That's good. You're in.
Okay.
like a running code. No.
All right.
No, you're right. You're right.
Dr. Powell's telling me to go to a meeting, so I have.
It'll be those days. You big truck calling in.
See, Texan,
That's not-
what ID is he providing?
I'm sorry.
What ID is he providing?
265-30-2573 is what's on the agenda.
Meeting ID?
Nothing else, I think the phone probably works like that, but meeting would be different.
Can we call him?
Is that the wrong meeting? You did. Yeah, you did.
Would that be the easiest thing? Just have him call.
Use your hair.
We struggled with that a lot. Just, that just happened before.
So.
You need to double check something.
He's working on
Okay, I just said we're checking. All right.
it. Would it, if you dial the phone number, would that work?
Yeah. The ID for the meeting right now is 507-187-181. And then if he wants to dial in, he can dial 1-224-501-3412.
Got it.
013-412.
That's for the phone.
What's that?
That's dial number. What was the meeting number?
507-187-181.
181.
He's gonna do this next. You have power, no? If you don't want it. You don't.
Okay.
I have a paper screen.
I'm with you.
So,
So I think that is it for my.
Steve?
Okay, I'm gonna be pretty quick today since we've got a lot on the agenda. First thing is the flood. The airport did pretty well responding to it. The flight line was only down, both runways were only down 3 hours, and the taxiways, they got the debris off pretty quick. We did have 3 inches of water come into the terminal. They came in both doors, the front entrance and the west side entrance. We got that remediated probably in about 8 hours. And then they came back the next day and did the carpet cleaning. We're still working on repair of the sheetrock in the terminal. But as you can see on the pictures, the west side of the airport got the worst. And that was mostly from the levee breach up about 2 miles up. So that was underwater for almost the whole week, probably through the weekend. We did have some problems in the Challenger, but that's always an issue with the water products. We've had minimal, it seems like right now we had minimal building damage. We had a few buildings that we've gone out and inspected. That should be in the process of being remediated. Denise can speak more on that. So we go to the next slide. The task order for the first phase of the ascent projects in the queue, so it should be approved anytime now. That'll be starting up. And then the last thing is AVEX. Most of you all were there for their open house on Tuesday. They've taken over what was formerly known as Mystic. They're going to be doing a lot of test and training here, but the beauty of AVEX is that brings us a part of the airport, which is our vision, is cradle to grave. So what AVEX offers is a lot of R&D, their manufacturing and oversight, so and training. So with our vision from the beginning of end for this airport, that AVEX brings that piece. So from the beginning of life to the end of life, it can happen here. And we're still processing with back shops. A lot of interest from the MRO, which we're still working with EDC on to try to get those folks in here as well. So there's plenty of opportunity coming. The next thing is still engaging with some investors on willing to come in and build buildings. The AVEX taking over this is going to help because now we've got interest in the people that support our other projects elsewhere. So there's more to come on that. I just don't, it's preliminary right now. Any questions?
So the MOU got signed by Gerald today with the county.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're good to go. And the first task order, Mike, is to do.
Conceptual schematic layout for the road building, so we can, that'll turn us loose for the surveying, so we can put topography, make sure we site those anchors where they need to be.
Those kind of a layout or
Yes.
site plan?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's the first has to be. Once everybody agrees, hey, this is what we're gonna do, it, then we can move on to the design.
What's your timeline on that process? I'm not gonna hold you to the file.
Thank you. Surveying will probably take. We're taking a big swath out there, obviously, to get it all infrastructure. Where the street is, we're basically looking at all, whole entire area. So that survey is probably gonna take 2 weeks. And you take it back, and then you gotta adjust it, you gotta get the boards and everything all straight. So it'll take a month for the survey. But after that, I'll be honest with you, I want everybody to know that, we haven't just been sitting here now waiting for something. We've actually been proactive. You're not gonna wait. We've actually been doing something.
We do. No action.
Yes, ma'am. We've actually been having layout. We've been working on the layout. So, for us, it's just we just want to get ahead.
So from the day the city signed the task order until when you start working, how long?
It's a month.
No, just to start, sign, just start work, not just finish it, but just to start. Like that.
Yes,
That's, I'm just trying to get,
Yeah.
and I'm not holding your feet apart, I'm just gonna do it.
like I said, we've got a pretty good start. We just need to verify on the survey and everything and what's going on out there. And then after that, we'll be able to talk about to actually provide you folks with a couple of layout designs, and you guys can kind of look, say, hey, we like this one, what's going here, so we have about 3 of them already done.
Dr. Powell's on.
Okay, let the record reflect, Dr. Powell is doing this by a go-to meeting as of 1:47. All right, can you hear us, Dr. Powell?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you.
All right, thank you, appreciate you joining us. We will get you a copy of Mr. Stark's PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
That'll come up to you.
Hey, Mike, so 30 days for the survey roughly, then is there another task order we need to generate from the city to do the
Design phase.
design phase?
Yeah, that's
And then another the bidding process?
And that's what we'll work with the city on as far as how they want to package it. So we're open to work with you, so you guys will tell us what you want us to do. So that's something we can definitely work with the city on.
Just trying to not get excited.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm trying to work with too, so I appreciate, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us maybe we want the design and layout and bidding. Definitely start working on that.
All right, let me ask this, kind of building what Mike's got, is assuming we get this signed quickly, by the time we meet again, which I think is 5 weeks from now, something like that. Do you think you guys would be in a position to kind of give us overall timeline?
We can, I mean, we can, we can give you guys at least a ballpark. It won't be real tight, but we can actually give you a good idea.
It's only gonna be 4 weeks, so it might not be, that might be
We'll be
too.
pushing on that.
Okay, let's plan on like August then. They give you more time, what do you think?
I think it'd be good for all of us to understand this as well. We get to ask questions.
Yeah, so, and I think 2 weeks, 4 weeks is just gonna be too tight.
Yeah, but, yeah. Like I said, we have. Start on
Yeah, we'll wait till August. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. It gives everybody a chance to catch a breath. Okay. Anything new on 84 in EPA stuff?
Waiting on the
We
response.
Yeah, we submitted all the paperwork that they required, and then it was funny, 2 days after I got it submitted, they were asking for us to resubmit it. So I've resubmitted it, which I think messed it up. So, but the last I heard from EDA is that they were gonna process it on their end. So all of our documents have been signed and uploaded as per the instructions, so it's on their end.
Yeah, she sent us an email as if we hadn't sent it, so that was interesting.
Sure. Nope. Anything else?
That's it for me. I'm turning over to Denise.
Well, at this point, General Murray, I'm going to do a quick introduction for you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, we'll try.
So, General Murray and I had a discussion in a intellectually stimulating location with adult beverages, which made us all significantly smarter. And we got on the topic of strategic planning. And General Murray made some comments to me because we're going to be looking at a new master plan for the Air Center. And I just asked for the general to do us a planning 101. And because he's done this for the Institute. And I just kind of think I like hearing this stuff. We'll see how all it fits in, but I like the idea of a 60,000 foot. General Murray, if you're comfortable there, you can stay there.
But I guess it's not for you. And again, this isn't normal. Now, you said something about adult beverages are going to be distributed. Well, that's how you do all your work and have it so successful, right? I should tell you that I'm so familiar with the time limit. Vice President of the Walker Museum. I can say working for my board member, we really appreciate the way the city and this institution here has provided and supported us. And we hope a bunch of things be able to move downtown. I also have with me Michelle Bates. Michelle has been with me almost the whole trip. And if you may know, in an academic environment, it's frequently responsibility of the chief academic officer or provost to look at the strategic perspective and to do what we call a strategic plan. I'm going to talk a little about the spelling concept of what that is. So Michelle has been a real part of that because within our organization, we assign responsibility to the institutional research office, and it's also the office that deals with accreditation. So the way of beginning, end, life, death type issue, and so it's a natural. The other thing I want to point out is we'll try to define here is that it's not it's as much decision based on statistics and data than it is anything else. And what and how we achieve things and have been able to achieve things has been because of the databases that we have created, making them integrated with the databases that accreditation organizations do. That is critical to an organization. When I was asked to do this, I forgot to warn the mayor that as an old professor, I usually talk in 50-minute periods, but I won't talk. I do want to kind of highlight what we are understanding, and I really want to talk a little bit about strategic planning, strategic thinking, and what we normally refer to as a strategic plan. As the title here points out, it's more than a document. When one hears the word strategic planning, they think of a strategic plan. Think of this document. And I will use as an example throughout what we did, because again, you said 101, and I'm also was told that there won't be a quiz after this, so don't worry about that. That's something else that us professors know so very, very well. But anyway, what I want to do is to give a broader perspective of not just the document, because the problem oftentimes with strategic planning and strategic plan is you put together a document like this. Few people put it together and it gets put on the shelf and it never gets used. And that's not what we're going to talk about here at all. But first things first. Next slide. These are called build slides. So who has the control? And click it one more time. Yeah. So I brought Michelle on because I want to be really get into the specifics. She can talk about need. long before you start to develop a strategic plan. I'm going to talk about it from a very broad perspective. One of the things I'm going to say is there are many definitions of a strategic plan. There are equally number of approaches to do strategic planning, financial planning, construction planning, and so forth. We pulled this all together and had the fundamentals. I should tell you that it comes from my experiences. I was obviously, we put together the strategic plan of 2010 for the school. It was a very significant, and it led to all of what we've done in the past 10 years, 4 consecutive accreditations at the highest possible level of accreditation. And in the very last one, which we just had in September, in that report, they said it was this planning system that drove what was accomplished in the past 10 years, and that they were looking forward to our movement in the next 10 years. And we just completed this document, which you have in front of you, which, as you can see, is 2030. So I brought this along to give you an example. We'll refer to it at times, but that's basically it. But the important thing is this: why? Why are you undertaking, Dennis, be specific, why are you undertaking strategic planning? What is it that you hope to accomplish? What's the purpose? Do you know why you're going to do this? It's a question I always ask when someone comes up with a new course or a new building or a new organization. What's the need behind it? And I find so often no one has thought about what is the need. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of the need, you begin to lose the defining parameters that are going to move the direction in which you go. So I would say here, what is the basic need that requires the organization to go under this process? That's number one. Next slide, please. This is a kind of agenda. First of all, we're talking about the scope of what strategic planning is, criteria for successful planning. Next, I'll let you read each of these pieces. And where we're going to go, how we're going to do it. By the way, we will make this all available to you, send it to you, so you don't have to take notes or anything. What I'm going to give you first is this is the, if you were to look up strategic planning in any of the major products references, it used to be World Book and Encyclopedia. It's now Wikipedia, right? But this is what they say about strategic planning. And I use it as a base. Strategic planning is an organization's process of defining its strategy or direction and making decisions on allocating its resources to pursue this strategy. It may also extend the control mechanism for guiding the implementation of the strategy. Strategy has many definitions, but generally involves setting strategic goals, determining actions to achieve those goals, mobilizing resources to exercise and execute the action. A strategy describes how the ends or goals will be achieved by the means, the resources. The senior leadership of an organization is generally tasked with determining strategy. Strategy can be planned, that is intended. It can be observed as a pattern of activity, and be emergent. So intended or emergent as the organization adapts to its environment or competes with it. That's the definition. That's what's on the test. That's the definition. I want to go beyond that because we have laid out the way we have worked in terms of, well, what do you really do? Tell me what you really do. So as we look at, so we're going to talk about scope. And when we talk about scope, can I have the next slide? Okay, when we talk about scope, I want to point out that there are many different approaches to strategic planning. There's at least 6 that I know of. One tends to, and the most frequent ones are those that are goal-oriented. They start with a set of goals or objectives, and that comes directly from that need. Okay. But there's another way to approach strategic planning, and that's capability. What are your capabilities? And then you design and work around those capabilities. There may be things that you would like to do, that are just beyond your capability, oftentimes resources and funding. So why would you come up with a goal to not have the capabilities to do it? So, in all the strategic planning I have always integrated those two approaches. The best example of that is the one I did with Supreme Allied Commander of U.S. Forces in NATO. And what we developed was a theater security planning system. And in doing that, we laid out what U.S. would be required to do in the post-Cold War environment. A lot of that was with capabilities. During the Cold War, the commander of NATO had to be concerned about one thing. The Soviet Union attack, of course, the photograph. You know something. Every year, all the military in the U.S. planned and went to Germany, tore through people's gardens and so forth. Tanks went rolling across. If you go to Germany, to this day, you'll still see every bridge has a plaque that tells about the weight that that bridge will hold as the tanks went rolling in. But when I briefed the commander with this theater security plan, was after the Cold War was over, he had all kinds of cats and dogs coming in Europe that he had to be responsible for. And I said, well, you know, it's like a football coach or wrestling, you know. So in the normal days, football coach knows who you're going to play against. You have resources about who these players are. You had a schedule and you knew where you're going to play. That's how it was in the Cold War, not in the post-Cold War. You don't know who the players are. You don't know where you're going to play. And oftentimes, you don't know what the rules are. So how do we do that? And again, capabilities are what is the capability? What's the Congress doing? But then also what goals and objectives. I mentioned that briefly as an aside, but that's the thinking that you should be having when you're going through this overall process. I guess what I really want to say, the best way to approach it in terms of scope, what we do with scope, is to think of it in terms of a system and a system of systems. And that is threefold. Go ahead, put it in the next one. And three. The key function, what is the operation that you do? What is the purpose of your organization? What is the purpose of your school? And so, for example, when we look at what are we? Our principal function is learning. We are a learning system. So that's what we do. That's where the rubber meets the road. So you've got to have a good understanding of your operations and your purpose. That's the key thing. But that system, what you do, in this case, learning, is the courses, it's the content, it's the syllabus. How do you support it? So the second system is the support system. In this case, it's the facilities, it's the admissions office, and it's all of those things. That's the second. And the third is accountability. And it's a process of evaluation of the support system and an assessment of the functional system. And for us, it's the evaluation of the support. How well is the admissions office bringing us in? How well are the various departments and agencies that are involved in this process? How well do they work? What is their purpose? How do they fit into this overall arching program? And so you're looking at goals and objectives. And the same thing in terms of it's learning. Here we're not talking about how well does the admissions office work. Here we're talking about what are those students learning? How well do they read? Not just because of their GPA, but what is their capability? So often that's not. And that's where accountability comes in. And you assess your functions based upon a set of criteria. In, for example, academic is learning outcomes that come from organizations like the American Association of Colleges and Universities. Universities, these are the learning outcomes. An organization is going to be tied to their set principles of organization. And then you evaluate the support in terms of goals and objectives. Okay, could I have the next slide? There's a criteria. Now this, again, this is what I've used, by the way, from having done that thing in your, next, I was asked by the Secretary of the Air Force to do one for all education and training throughout the entire Air Force. I only mentioned those to, not to toot my own horn. My horn is getting pretty weak these days, but it is to give you an idea of what you are hearing and seeing is a practical. I wanted to read you that quote, because that's the philosophy, that's the classroom answer, okay? I'm trying to give you the practices, practical. I never took courses in planning, involved in these different levels throughout. So that's why this is kind of the background. What is this talking about? Why does he know it? It's from the practical. So here's the practical criteria. Fourfold. It needs to be current. Whatever you do in terms of strategic planning, it has to reflect the reality of the time in which you live. Second, it has to be comprehensive. By that means it needs to cover all of the organizations and departments. They all need to be part of this effort, not just one part. Third, and this thing is very important, it has to be relevant. What is that? Well, obviously, it has to relate to your purpose, goals, and objectives. But more than that, relevancy here means that everyone in that organization knows their role in it. So again, as an example, that instructor in the classroom, that coach on the athletic team, CLA, regiment, parade field, they have to be able to open this book up, look at the goals and objectives, and know how they have contributed to it. In fact, they need to look at this before they do anything. That's what happens. That's why these things go on the chart. It's not a document. This is not a document. It's just the reference that comes out of this other major elements of the organization and process. That's what we mean by relevant. So often say, oh, I've got this copy of the strategic plan. In fact, we give a copy to everybody who comes on board. And by the way, it comes in different versions, but this is the quick version that everybody can get and they can look at. So a professor wants a new course, they're going to come and say, okay, how does it fit in the strategic plan? That's relevancy. Fourth and most important, legitimate. If it's going to be legitimate, it has to include all the players. It doesn't have to include and start and end with an organization like this, an organization of senior leaders meeting together, maybe over some drinks or whatever, deciding where they're going to go with the strategic plan or with the strategic planning effort. It needs to involve everyone. It needs to be bottom up. When we started this plan, I had two questions. What's the world going to look like in the next 10 years? And how is that world going to impact NMMI? The first thing is we surveyed the entire campus and asked them those two questions. Now, nobody has a crystal ball. Everybody has a perception of what's happening and how it might affect the school. Example number one. So did we everybody get a copy of this? I think. Example number one, close to the heart of many people here, is cost. Do you all have one down there? Okay, looks like fossil fuels. All right. What's the future of fossil fuels in the United States? As you know, there is considerable discussion in this administration about where we're going to get our energy from. Not 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and beyond. So that's a reality. Whether it emerges or not is a possibility. It will. Okay. Time, money, effort, whatever is going into it. All right. Well, what does that mean for NMMI? Do I care? Well, it means an awful lot. We have a permanent fund, and on the money that comes from leases, 70% more of our operations come from fossil fuels. That means that our tuition at NMI is the lowest tuition for a school like us anywhere in the country, because most of the military schools are private in nature and they depend upon tuition. So the tuition's $40,000 a year. We're talking a different number, but we're talking approximately $15,000 a year, and that includes their clothes. Okay, so what does that mean? We better be thinking about a source of resources in the future, and in terms of people as well, the availability of people. That's what we're talking about. When we're looking at that. Another one, of course, is the pandemic. We could have predicted the pandemic. Oh, it's a pandemic. So what? How does that impact us? It impacted us in a lot of different ways, not just in enrollment, but all of a sudden we were asked to begin teaching online. We never taught online. The students never took courses. We had no courses. So you see, we went out to the faculty, we went into the coaches and asked them in the survey, you tell us. Then we took that product and we asked, okay, the folks who deal with our accountability every year, and I'm not going to go into that organization, they dealt with the goals and objectives that are listed in our existing plan. Who better to look at and ask this question? You heard what the possibilities are may happen. You know how it would impact us. Now, how is it going to affect goals and objectives? But that's what we talk about legitimacy. We had over 30-some folks throughout the organization in different process action teams, ultimately working together to produce a product. So we had everyone from members of our Board of Regents to folks who cut the grass. Somehow, we're not just getting, oh, here's our plan. Would you review it? How many times have you been given a strategic plan? No, that's not what we wanted them, and we're actually engaged in writing it. When we finished the first draft, which involved these 30-some people in different ways, not all together. We didn't put 30 people in a room. We're talking about no more than 4 or 5 in any one. But we then sent that out in draft form. And Michelle, and we had 5 major portions of it. We asked them to meet. We gave them a week to deal with each. We had 5 criteria that we were working. We asked each of them to meet and decide and look at this plan, then come up with suggestions. And when we had meetings, and this is what we were doing with accreditation, doing the same process with the strategic plan itself. Right, for accreditation, we had 5 criteria. We had a draft of that document. We broke them into groups. But the same point was here. They had an opportunity to provide input to us. That just started the process of the actual document that was drafted. So that's why legitimacy is so important. Top-down legitimacy. So that's the criteria. To the extent that we should follow it, the better you are in terms of what that outcome. First of all, you have tremendous buy-in. It's my document. Oh, I was the one who suggested this. I was the one who changed that criteria. I was the one who changed that goal. That's so important. Plus, goes back to the relevance. Hey, I'm going to use this. I can use this, so it's going to make sense for me to get involved in what comes out. Not just from that year two guys. That's not because the dean or the commandant think that. They're thinking bottom up. Here's some fundamental definitions. We'll get this to you. But many people, this is go right now, because I don't want to take too much of your time. But these are things that we use these terms all the time, but you need to have an agreement. So this is what a goal is. Statement of purpose, objective is a measurable goal. What capability and competency, there's a distinction between the two. What resources are, what a process is, what an initiative is, a performance measure, and what it is. And these are just key definitions that everyone should have at least starting with, so that when they're talking about resources, they're talking about tangible, intangible words. And then, by the way, when you start to talk about accountability rubrics, I don't know how many people remember or know what they call in school, what a rubric is, but this is where you're actually tested. This is just, again, everybody on the same sheet of paper. Next slide, please. Essential elements of a strategic plan. And this is the point that I was making a little bit earlier. There are three essential elements. There is the core document, and this is an example of the core document. It's the outcome of the effort. It's what records the outcome of the effort. But it's not the focus. This is just the reporting. You need a document. The second, organization and process. That organization should be an enduring organization. We did this thing in Europe under the peer security planning system. We created executive advising council. Would you believe that the commanders, the military commanders of the services in Europe, safety, U.S. Air Force Security Commander, or U.S. Army Commander, the 4 stars, out in the field, commanding, never met with the joint council, the joint J5, J2, the joint work. So the first thing is we created a steering committee, and we brought all those generals for the first time together with the people in Patch Barracks and Stuttgart that were actually responsible for executing the effort in Europe at the time. But guess what? We also brought into that same organization the ambassadors of all these countries. Again, it's only as an example of what you need to make sure you go back to that idea of relevance, comprehensiveness. And then you have to have a process in which these players, these organizations, interact on a regular basis. So it's a constant feedback. Okay. Now I want to briefly look at the contents of the document itself, because in doing that, outline of how you conduct the process. Okay. The first piece, 2 pieces, that's the vision and mission. Every document will have in the beginning a vision and mission. That is after you determine what and why, what's the need. Once you have a good idea, now you're going to start talking about your vision and your mission. Now here I find tremendous misunderstanding of what a vision and a mission is. And oftentimes, and this is not just semantics, people interchange those words. Some will say the mission comes first and then the vision comes. That's not the way it ought to be. Can you?
You'll be going to go through these and then go back to the vision.
We'll come back to that. So these are the parts of the core document. We'll touch on very briefly. Okay, so let's go back to the first 2, vision and mission. Here's a definition of vision. Here's a definition of mission. You can read it. Here's the part. Vision is a look to the future. Vision is what you want to be. It's the state of being. That is the vision. That's what that is intended to be. It focuses your process. If you focus on vision, you're focusing long term. You're talking at a strategic level when you talk about vision. Before we entertain going into a new strategic plan, this document, before we ever got to that, we began to look at 2 years ago, 3 years ago, our vision. People focus on mission all the time, but they don't say much about the vision. I always say, have you checked your vision lately? No, I don't mean that. I don't. Looking at the vision. We realize that in the vision of NMSA, which goes back 1891, and by the way, I was not there. The school was founded, so when I got there, okay. The point is, education is all about leadership development, being a military school. and understanding by it, like won't be in school and it's not about one. That's another story. But again, it means you understand your terms. That's why definitions I have up there. But what we change is we're living in a global world, global society. Our young men and women who graduate are not allowed to be leaders in terms of a national, local, state, family. It's a global world. So we realized that our vision needed to include that dimension. And so our vision now is a global military school for leadership development. It's the essence of the vision. And it's expanded on in here. That then drives mission. The mission is how you achieve the vision. It's the specifics of what you're going to do. That's where you'll find these other elements we're going to go through, because this is a document that lists them. But they all address the vision, how the organization.
And I was going to tell you, we had in 2017, we had a big meeting with 30-some people, and talking about this vision when we redid it, there was a lot of friction about what word should go first, academic or leadership. And you think about a school like NMSA, which is it? Which one goes first? And we decided as we talked among these people, and I mean, this took a lot of talking about this concept about, and we decided that where we really set ourselves apart was in the area of leadership. And so leadership went first. So you think these words don't mean anything, but when you're putting them down on paper and where they are, those kinds of things matter.
Vision is long-term. Vision is thinking strategically. Vision is about a grand strategy. A grand strategy. Mission is more immediate. Mission is the mechanism to achieve, as I said before, the vision. It's tactical as opposed to strategic. It's short-term. Mission statements are normally maybe 3 to 5 years out. You adjust those based upon your outlook. So, what this great facility here, what's the vision of it 10, 15 years from now? It's going to be a spaceport, whatever. But how do you get there? That's what the mission is. Now, here's the thing. What a grand strategy is to your vision, I got to tell you, countries that have succeeded in the world have a grand strategy. The U.S. accomplished its position as being the #1 nation in the world for most of the 20th century because the presidents during that period, 100 years, beginning with Teddy Roosevelt, had a grand vision, grand strategy of what we would do. You can find in each president, and I guess the other one, I think, it's named after him, like David Eisenhower, and what he saw the world to be after World War II. He saw the thing beyond the earth, looked to the stars, and the space program began with him, but it was then picked up by John Kennedy. He had a grand strategy. He talked 10 years ago. Separate issue, unfortunately, he went to the moon and that's a true story. That's where grand strategy, by the way, we're now in the process of grand strategy. Don't you think this idea of a space force is grand strategy? We used to be the #1 space-faring nation in the world. We were that through most of the 20th century. We need to be that. Again, we're going off. But again, you can see what I'm talking about, a grand strategy. He forced us into the space program. Right? I'm saying we're going to go to the, you know that. I was just going to college. I went to school when he became president. inspiration he gave our generation. We saw. He, you know, we have a choice. But I'm saying, he molded that generation. And he molded them. Had he not done that, do you think we would be where we are today? Do you think that we would have this race throughout the 60s to engage with Russia and so forth? That's the point about this grand strategy. That's why it's so important. Then you've got to have a mission. So grand strategy deals with vision. Strategic plan deals with mission. That's where you get results. That brings you to the next slide. I'll go through this. This is what the mission involves. And it's listed and identified in the book. And that's what this core document. Your values. What are your values? What is it that you believe is most important? It drives everything that you do, not just in terms of purpose, but in terms of values and a system of values. So, for example, our threefold value system: duty, honor, achievement. Guiding principles. What are the guiding principles that enable you to achieve those values? You'll see as we go through this book on page 7, you'll see the guiding principles. One of those, obviously, is we are going to be a military school. We are going to have an honor. But we are going to be a school that is a residence. Those are guiding principles. You don't see them change. They don't change very often. And then, of course, you list your goals. You identify the strategic direction. So if you look at page 12, look at page 10, you'll see our goals. We have 5 overall goals. They, by the way, break out into the major elements of the school. So I'm the dean. Goal B is my major goal. Not that I'm not also involved in the others. And then you have your strategic direction. That's sort of how do you plan to seek that goal. And that strategic direction then leads you to page 12, which is your objectives. What are the objectives to achieve the goals through that strategic direction? Then the organization and process that you're going to use. Next, what initiatives come out of that? Our finance officer was fantastic when we was developing around 2009, and she said to everybody on the campus, if you want something in the budget, you have to come and show me how what you want fits in with strategic. Show me how it meets a particular objective. Show me what the resources are that you're wanting. If you don't give me that, you're going to have no chance. That's what we're talking. And you probably heard. I just talked about group in town about where we're going in the future. And I said, well, one of the things, that initiative has come up. We're going online associate's degree. Not for any of our students. This is for students that have long left school. First responders who never had any post-secondary education. Enlisted who never had, never got that. That's what we talk about. Initiatives. And then assessment, we talked about that. How are you going to assess how well you are achieving your mission? Here's an important distinction. Don't tell me how well you did your job. Tell me how well doing your job impacted the mission. Oh, we did a great job in, and it's a good example right there, fantastic. We did a great job in recruiting. Oh, tell me what. Well, yeah, last year we visited 25 schools, and this year we visited 45 schools. Look at the advancement that we made. That's not what we're talking about. Tell me what happened because you increased those number of visits in terms of the number of students and the diversity of that group. That's an example of what you're talking about. Assessment. Okay. We're almost to the end of this. Okay, how do you get started? Does everybody know what SWOT is? Okay. This is the traditional ways in which you begin to do any kind of strategic planning. Again, you're going to cancel the hearing. It's not just a document, it's an organization and it's a process. Well, what processes do you have now? What organizations do you have now? And so SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a traditional business approach to strategic thinking and planning. Strengths, so look at that chart. On the left-hand side, you will see strengths and, I'm making this up, strengths and weaknesses at the top. Strengths and weaknesses. They are internal. What do you do well? What do you not do? So if you sit down in a room like this with a group of folks or multiple groups, and you say, let's talk about what do we do well? I was listening to some of that when you were talking about something. What do you do well? Hey, what don't we do too well? That's what weaknesses are. They're internal. Then you look at the external. External. What are the opportunities out there? You can see how this clearly impacts manufacturing. What products you're going to make. What are your? We looked at that. We think there's a great opportunity at NMSA to do a middle school, especially with the problems we face with COVID and all that is going about. But what are the opportunities? We're talking about dual credit, dual graduate program. What's the opportunities out there? But what are the threats? I like the word challenges, but that's just me, because the process of SWOT analysis, they're the threats. In the business world, that's your competitors. But you start, you get a group to look at each one of these. When we started working with this, we had 4 process action teams that began to take all that input that we saw from what the world was going to be and how it was going to impact us, and broke it out into these broad areas.
And another thing that was interesting that happened, in the beginning, we were going, Steve and I were figuring out how we're going to do this. We thought we would have those groups, all of them, come up with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All of them come up, and then we would compare what the 4 groups came up with. But they said, no, give each one of us one. So one group then took all the strengths, then a different group took the weaknesses, a different group took the opportunities and the threats. And, on our own, we wouldn't have thought of that, of doing it that way. But we took their input, and we were really glad that we did, because you had totally different perspectives come out of that. And whereas the other way might have gotten some groupthink going on. And so just keep your mind open to different ways of doing it when you're doing it.
And this is what we want. Quantifiable. Quantifiable. Have to have data to support what your strengths are. Say we're strong in doing this, or we see this as a great opportunity. What is it? Are we competitive? When you're deciding your approach to the whole strategic planning effort, is what is your capability? That's why capability is a good approach to strategic planning. I've always felt, as I said, I'm repeating myself now, I like to use goals and capability combined. That's certainly what we did when we looked at developing a planning program and budgeting system for the European Union. So that's the key. That's kind of where you start. Once you know where you're going, then you sit down and say, well, what could we do? What's our abilities to achieve that? Where do we want to go? And that's then when you begin to talk about, what do we want to be? That's where the next step comes in when you talk about it. And then looking at your internal strengths and weaknesses, but what about how do we achieve that? That's where you talk about your mission. And then you put the 2 together to come up with some sense of what your goals are, the objectives to achieve it, and then add it on. Last slide, just to show you how it kind of all fits together. This is what we do and how we do it. And it's a closed loop all the time. And again, this is just us, but I wanted to give you an example of how we did it. So that's us, that's what, hopefully you find it of some interest, is how, what we believe when we talk about strategic thinking that leads to strategic planning, and then at some point, adopt.
And I'll tell you, getting the dean, so we had spent 2 years getting ready for accreditation. An accreditation visit happened in September last year. And we no sooner get that done, then we have our yearly process that we've got to go through. And then we're going to start the strategic plan. And then he decides to retire. So we've got,
Get out while they're getting.
we've got, I mean, it's like we've been in race mode for 3 years. But this last year, we started at the end. We said, okay, we've got to have a strategic plan by the May Board of Regents meeting. And then we worked backward. And then we saw, and when we did it, when we put it on paper, this timeline on paper, I thought, there is no way we're gonna, this is too much. But what it did was that timeline, because we had the end date, that timeline forced us into staying on track. And so I would say that's a good thing. I would have never believed we could have done it in 6, well, it wasn't even full 6 months. It was more like 4. And I mean,
We
it
kept
took,
pushing people.
yes.
But this sort of goes back, Mr. Mayor, what you were talking about earlier with the timeline and getting an idea of where it fits together. That then begins to drive momentum.
And I believe if you do have that end date set, people will, they'll know the urgency. And so then they'll like, oh, we gotta get our part done before we go on to the next part. And so you do have some kind of, well, we gotta have it done by this time, and find some reason that you have to have it done by that.
One of the greatest obstacles to this process of strategic thinking is the in-basket. Because the in-basket has a very loud voice at times, dominates the other. When I work at the bank, we create, the Department of Defense created a strategic division. Their job was to ignore investments. They worked in terms of that vision and reported directly to senior leadership about normal chain of command. Outside it, it goes back to what Michelle was talking. Because you all know it, that investment has a loud voice. As much as you'd like to spend time thinking about it, you got to answer the mail.
And it also, when you have it on paper, and I would say ours is simplified, because look how little it is. A lot of people's strategic plans like that big. If you make it simple enough where it's adjustable, and I will say that it helped us this time around because we had a pretty good one to start with. But doing that first one was pretty painful. And, so if you don't have one at all, do you have one at all? No? So if you don't have one at all, the first one is a little more painful. But when you go to do it the next time, it becomes much easier because you've got a pretty good foundation.
It's been our hope today, sir, and I hope we met that we would give you things to think about. This is, we use how we did it. As I said at the beginning, there are many different ways and many different approaches. So there's no perfect way. But at least these are the kinds of things, whatever it is.
And it makes the assessment so much easier. You assess it in terms of what you've got written there. And so, you're not, everybody's just not, when we first started doing the support side, 8 years ago, We had every support organization, financial aid, the ones he was talking about, facilities, all these people, they had never done that. They're like, and so we started out with, tell us what your purpose is for being at NMSA. Why do we have a financial aid office? Why do we have a facilities department? And so if you start with that and then you say, okay, well, this is the reason we have it, how do you know you're successful at doing that? Whatever you say it is, and we didn't tell them why we had a facilities department. They had to tell us. And then we said, okay, so how are you say you're doing that, where's the proof? And evidence, the evidence, getting people to realize, hey, I got to produce a document that says we really do this.
I'm going to throw it open. Anybody wants any questions at all?
Great presentation.
They're finding out value.
Yes.
I want to start with saying thank you for sharing this with us, because when I looked at this, that's very much in line with the way I was thinking this process should go. Because it takes everybody's opinions and thoughts, and it's very data driven. And we don't start with a conclusion and work through a document. You do it the other way. You start with these ideas of who are we and the mission, vision, and you work it down through the document. I think if you don't do it that way, you come up with a tweaked document, if you will. It's slanted in some way for an individual or a group, and it doesn't. It's meant to be your compass. It's really what it's meant to be. And if you don't do it that way, I don't think it functions well. So I appreciate this very much.
And if you'll tie budget to that, everybody will pay attention to it. Because, and you'll be surprised at how much you wrestle with these words. Trying to get a statement and just getting those words just right.
Yeah, I appreciate the talk about this doesn't go on the shelf, because people tend to do that. Okay, we checked that box.
That's a relevancy and a just.
That's right.
Your heart, mind, soul, and putting it together and seek value. So everyone comes into the school, regardless of what they're going to do, it's a topic of that.
And I would argue the bigger it is, the less
Yes.
Yes.
it becomes a daunting task to review it.
The idea of reviewing every 3 to 5 years to keep it relevant is fabulous. That's also what happens. I mean, you get it thick and people don't read it, it's not relevant. If you don't update it as the world changes, it's also not relevant.
Yeah, and we have this process called annual strategic accountability process that is yearly and it's ongoing. It's not like, oh, it's time to look at this now. It's consistent.
And that would remind you more of like an annual report in the business world, like an annual report. And so we go through this whole process, and I mean, everybody whines and cries and carries on, and and somewhat I feel bad in a way, because they all know that I'm going to bug them until they get it. And because the way we built our process, you have to do certain things before you move on to the next thing. And so we only have a few months to do that whole process. And so we can't go forward with the next piece until all these little pieces are done.
And every year
they
we
know
put
it.
together a document that has the net result. Bottom line is, how well did you meet the vision? And that's driven by the budget process when we have to work with the legislature, what we're doing and what we're doing. It has to be in that same time. That then is turned over to the superintendent, usually just before Christmas. That's my Christmas present. So read through the document. And it goes down in line, way down, so he sees data from all those different departments. But he also sees the conclusions, piece by piece. So the bottom line, how well did you meet? Or how well did you meet the goals and objectives? So.
And we also have them tell us what their shortfalls were. And then in the next year, they have to tell us how they address the shortfalls from the last year and what are the current year shortfalls that they'll have to say the next year. But I would caution you from making it punitive. They have to look at this stuff as being self-improvement, a good hard look at what you do and with the eye on improvement, improving your operations, improving what you do. And let me tell you, you do one bit of punitive out of it and it'll all be baloney. It won't be an honest reflection because they'll just give you what you think they think you want, what you think you want to hear. And there won't be much improvement really in there.
This is not reflect, it's not a performance. We're not evaluating your performance, we're evaluating how well your organization, obviously it's a relationship, but when it's not determined what grades are. It's about the stuff, that way they see it.
And I would suggest that the more you, once this is agreed upon and relevant and everything else, the more you stick to that. If you can even tie it to performance, if it's not directed, but indirected, that performance will be better because it meets the goal of the organization.
But just like you were real honest in what I noticed in your figure, we're not better than we were last year. But this is the reason why. And so when you among your colleagues, if you feel like you can be, honest about what happened. Our athletic director was really honest this last year. And he said, we had some major challenges and we couldn't do what we needed to do. And, everybody knows it. But it's not he's sitting over there acting like, oh, we're great. And, it just creates an understanding on the part of the whole organization. And everybody understands what everybody's doing.
There are rubrics to support this. So exceeded, met, not met, but merged. And then there's nothing wrong with coming up with not met, as long as you understand why. It's just like failure. There's nothing wrong with failure if you learn from failure. So we make that as what would you say, an environment based on trust. I can tell you what's wrong. Not your advisor.
All right, I hate to say this, we can continue on this, except we have more agenda items we have to resolve. General, you're more than welcome to stay, both of you, but here's what I'm thinking is, next month, we're gonna talk about where do we start. We start talking next month, where do we begin this whole process?
Another document we might share with them is that blueprint. And that just that's where we started at the due date and worked back. You could see kind of what we did, and not that our way of doing it is the right way, but it seemed to work this time in spite of the short
And
time.
then find, for example, here you are, process too. So we just kind of give you an overview of all your own process has to be.
And the more you do it, the better you get.
Thank you. More than welcome to have that. We'll use some.
In general, I'll get back to you on the other end. All right, Mr. Garcia.
All right.
Yeah, and I think
Thank you for your service, brother. I appreciate it. I must say that I'm leaving Roswell, but I will be back frequently. I'm still staying on a position at the school. I said this the other day, and I mean it sincerely. This is a wonderful town. And the point about it, I've never been in a town is more committed to serving the nation, serving those who serve the nation. I can't tell you, I mean, all the activities on Veterans Day, say for example, the overlap. And this place comes, this, I'm not running clocks right now, at all.
Good.
So I said almost over, I'm 78 years old, and it's there, right? But no, seriously, the point is that the commitment to serving the nation, over to the Walker Foundation, Walker Museum, now here, space here. So, thank you all. It's been a great, and we're not giving up. We'll be back. I didn't mean I'm taking up more of your time. I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna, Mike, you're gonna know what I'm about to say. That man reached general officer status in the force organization where you were not a pilot or a navigator. You were a second class. He was not an academy grad, which is another strike against him. For that man to go as far as he did in the Air Force, my estimation, probably, it's really why I left the Air Force, because I was non-rated. I knew I was going to be second class, right? But I not knowing, well, he's going back to college. Yeah, I've never had a nicer guy make me feel so stupid.
That's why he made general.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Sure. Waterline update. Yeah, waterline's not very sexy, so, get to it.
Oh, you did?
On the engineering side, design. Design's about 25 to 30% completed. The group, is working with Bruce and the public works guys really well, getting all the data they need for the new tank. Everything on that, on the design portion is going really. So, date for review by the two works. We're looking at doing the preliminaries in the middle of July. So Lewis and his group should get those. And then those preliminaries submittals, those will include the drawings as well as all the hydraulic modeling. And that modeling is actually outside. So that's why they're working really close with Lewis and his group. So everybody's in tune with the pressures and everything that's required. The final submittal is going to be, if everything goes well, we'll get the comments back from the Public Works Department. And once we get those comments on the preliminary stuff, the final submittal, we're looking at, late September. We should have those submittals late September. Hopefully everything looks good by then. We anticipate a lot of changes. Final stuff should be really clean. So then we start looking at the bidding date. Going back to closing. So we're looking at the bidding date. Working with the airport. This is group on the bidding. Looking like mid to late October. Again, working with everybody on bidding. It's typically a 30-day advertisement period for that kind of project. Again, we'll follow the requirements on that. And with that, we should be getting everything in line. Open question.
What I'm thinking is August 19th is our August meeting. How about that'll be after your preliminary at the end of July. Come back then and update us again. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
Okay. Cool.
Take a second to get the link. Continue to,
Is he coming back on? Yeah, I think Sean had to sign off, get another
Yeah.
engagement. So,
Yeah, we have that.
yeah, so he got to. hard to change. That way it'll get recorded. We've been talking about that for a while.
And that was, yeah, that was one of the discussions.
Yes. I think that's still something, maybe not specifically that process.
Well, you know, and one thing, I mean, what I'm thinking here is, okay, we just heard all this. What do we do? And then, what do you think we should do? What do you think, Mike? Steve? Denise? I'd love to hear from our tenant.
Sure. And I'm anxious to hear Dr. Bowles input too.
Yeah.
Because they do this.
I'm like, well, what do we think? That's counselor stuff, so whatever you
Well, I
want
mean,
to
the
think.
first difference is,
But that's okay. There are comments.
no, I'm
Sure.
talking about the school
Oh.
versus the field club.
It's
The
school,
government.
yeah. Exactly. But I think, you know, as we want to work more like a business, we can kind of wrap it that way. And again, that's going to be part of this discussion. Hey, there's Sean.
Let's let Sean do his thing.
Yeah, all right. We were just killing time. We got Sean on.
Yeah.
We'll get on the-
See his glasses, Mr. Mayor. See his green glasses are there.
The gray is alien glasses.
Yep.
Uh-oh. Oops.
He probably put those on there today. Me.
Can you hear us, Sean? I can. You okay? Yeah, yeah, we're good. We're still messing with our speakers, but I think we can hear you. No, I think it's pretty good.
Can you all hear?
Barely, can you turn the volume up on the computer? Maybe that'll turn it up on the speakers.
No, I think it's not. Okay, try it out, Sean. Yeah, we can hear you on the computer, but we're trying to get you on the bigger speakers.
Gotcha, all right.
There we go.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay.
It's your show, my friend.
I'm trying to set up my screen sharing here so you can see my stuff. All right. Yeah, so thank you guys for allowing me to join. Is everybody good or?
Yeah, I think we are.
All right.
So,
So my name again, for those who don't know, is Sean Hickey. I'm with Rub Building Systems. I live and work for my house in Connecticut. Rub is based in southern Maine, which is about 3 hours north of me. So A little bit of quick background about me and the company. I've been with Rub since 2014. I had previously worked for a competitor for about 5 years previous to that. So I'm about 12 years or so into the building industry, doing fabric structures. Rub as a company, we were originally started in Norway back in the late 1960s. We then kind of made our way slowly across the pond over to the US. We've got a facility in northern UK near Newcastle. And then we've got our US manufacturing facility in southern Maine. As you can see here, this is kind of a overhead view of our factory. We design, manufacture everything inside of our own buildings. So we are a believer in the technology as well. In the States, we're a little bit of a smaller organization. Right now, we've got about 60 plus people, plus or minus. We are currently ISO 9001 certified. I think our renewal was in 2018, so I apologize for the typo on the 15 there. Historically, as a company, we've operated in a few primary markets. Military is really how we cut our teeth. And then we got into doing many hangars and also a lot of port-related buildings like big warehouses. Our structures get used for a variety of other uses as well, but those are kind of our core competencies is aviation, military, and warehousing. So as a company, we take great pride in doing things the right way, following building code, putting up buildings that are meant to withstand harsh conditions and last a long time. Our buildings, the way that we design them is a little bit different than others in the industry. Couple of the key things when we're designing to build a thing, they're meant to take full snow load, full wind load. They can be designed for seismic conditions. And one of the key components that really separates us from our competition is we design the frame system of our buildings to be self-supported, standalone. So if there's ever an image, the structural integrity is not affected. We're very proud of the fact that we've never had any structural failures. And we also take great pride in that many of our buildings have lasted 25, 30 years, or even longer in some instances. So a couple of key reasons why people would choose a Rub building versus a typical building. One of the big things is our standard finish on the frame system is much superior than a pre-engineered metal building. We typically on our frame system, our standard finish is a post-fabrication active galvanization, which basically means that we've done welding the entire structure. It all gets dipped in these multiple single bats coated on the inside and outside. So much better than fine painting system, which you typically see on a pre-engineered metal building. The other big advantage to our frame system is that it's much stiffer. So a pre-engineered metal building and steel in general will flex a little bit under the load. Our buildings are very rigid and stiff, which is key to having a big aircraft door function up and down over time and not shift over time and then get jammed up. So very compatible with big door openings and other systems inside potentially need a rigid frame system. The other big advantage to our buildings is that it's very easy to make changes in the future. It's essentially a modular system, so we can come back in the future and the building. We've also dismantled and re-erected a few of our structures. We've had one hangar go from the east coast of the U.S. all the way over to the Middle East at one point. I think it's up to like 40,000 miles traveled around the world in a few different locations. So the buildings truly can be located if you need to. We design the buildings for long-term needs, meaning, again, fully compliant, wind load, snow load, and occupancy, collateral load for equipment inside the building, just like you would a traditional building. Another big advantage to our structures is the fabric depth. The fabric made just for us from a company in France called Ferrari. Very product. It's an architectural membrane. It's meant to be exposed to UV and wind and hail, rain. The membrane itself is energy efficient in the sense that for single layer membrane, it is translucent, so you can read data inside the building for daylight hours. Many of our customers don't even need lights during daytime operations. Conversely, if we insulate the building, we lose that translucency, but our insulated cladding system is much more efficient than a traditional pre-engineered metal building with fiberglass insulation on the inside. We essentially make it a big equivalent and over the exterior portion of our building to be efficient. Last couple of reasons why people would choose a rub building. They're safer than conventional buildings. So the fabric that I had talked about before that is made over in France for us is wind retardant. So it's not propagate or spread flame if it's exposed to it won't spread fire if it's exposed to flame. So if there's a fire in one corner of the building, it won't spread to other corners of the building. It'll essentially melt away the fabric cover in that portion, let all the smoke escape through that whole roof, and then people can escape, and then interior temperatures never get hot enough to damage the frame. We've done full-scale fire testing with Factory Mutual, and we've had real-world fire events where buildings have been engulfed in flames, and we've got them running in a matter of 1 to 2 weeks with a new cover. So very safe when it comes to fire safety, especially related to aircraft hangars. And obviously, the one that people come to us for, lower construction costs, so we can keep our buildings faster than a conventional building, saves time on site, possibly site labor, especially with many of our components are all fabricated in our factory. Any questions?
Nope. Good.
So just to kind of give you a quick little rundown, that right there, top left corner shows the trusses of our building getting hot dip galvanized after the fact. So it kind of looks like the end of the Terminator movie there. The zinc covers the inside and outside of our steel. So best way to do for corrosion resistance. Essentially will result in an indefinite lifespan for the steel frame. Like I talked about before, these things can easily be dismantled and moved if you need to. So there is some flexibility in the future. Like I talked about with the membrane before, made specially for us. We actually use also a special design program called NDN membrane that allows us to analyze facets of the membrane cladding and make sure that it is compatible with the design of the steel frame. So unlike others in our industry that kind of make some assumptions, we're fully analyzing everything with software, and that can all be shared with the end user as well. We offer a 3-year warranty on our buildings, which includes the fabric membrane cladding as well as the steel. So we really do believe it lasts a long time, and we've got real world data. Our oldest building was originally put up in 1984, Portland, Maine waterfront, and it's still got its original cover on to this day, even though we've told that they could use a replacement anytime now. The other big advantage to the fabric cladding is that it is kind of a way to market a business on its own. It's a little bit unique. It's not your conventional building. And it's very easy to add, as you see down here in the lower picture. That was at Boston Logan, faced the highway, so they've got a ton of visibility going by the airport, and they advertised the United hangar right on the back of the hangar itself with this screen printing that they did. You can also add signs and other exterior marketing type things.
Very cool.
So again, talk about fire safety. It's really a key thing for us. We had originally, based on our first hangar that we put up in Boston back in 1995, I believe it was, had helped amend NFPA 409 to include now Group 4 hangars, which is membrane hangars, us. So very familiar with fire code and requirements and everything, and can help customers kind of navigate that as they go. projects. The other big thing I talked about was cost savings. A portion of that is the installation, but another big component is the foundation. Our buildings typically require a little bit of concrete depending on the soil conditions. So customers are able to save a little bit of money on foundation costs as well. And we've got some alternative systems if concrete is not a viable option. This is our insulated cladding system for customers who need climate control. Typically, warmer climates, people use our single layer fabric and open doors and include some ceiling fans, and you kind of get a big shade tree effect where it stays about 10 degrees cooler inside. If you need to mechanically cool the building, air conditioning, or heating, we can then insulate it using our thermal wall system. This technology was developed over in Norway originally. The key components are that this fiberglass insulation is essentially encapsulated in a big quilt that we make at our factory. So it's never exposed to water or moisture. It's locked in place with these little internal baffles that you see there, horizontal piece between the two pieces of fiberglass insulation. And that means that it'll last a long time. It essentially gets put over the exterior portion of the frame. As you can see here, this is a smaller building, obviously. It kind of gives you an idea of how we do that and then how it gets installed. So foundation, we've got a lot of different options. On the right-hand side, that's typical concrete in some shape or form. For smaller buildings, obviously not wide-body type anchors, but smaller warehouse buildings, storage buildings. We do have a temporary anchoring system, which you see on the top left here. And then we could also do a precast concrete type of foundation like you see on the lower graphic. Our buildings come in all shapes and sizes. We do, like I said, aircraft hangars to, I covered a nuclear reactor that was being built in South Carolina before, kind of that center, very tall building. It's about 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide. We've also done multiple bay hangars where we'll connect multiple spans together. Very cost-effective arrangement when compared to doing just a wide span hanger. Our storage buildings example, we can do your typical square box to weird shapes and sizes as you see in the lower left there. Some of our larger span warehouses. You can see those are both our translucent single layer fabric, and you can see the natural light inside there. No lights are on those photos. So we've done a few cargo facilities for United Airlines, I think 7 in total back in the early 2000s. These are also some of our port warehouse you see here, lower left. And then lower right here is a C-130 hangar complex down in Texas for a military contractor. Now some more hangar stuff to give you kind of a glimpse into what we've done hangar-wise and some of our experience. So we talked before about kind of extreme weather experience. We've done buildings in Japan that were rated for over 200-mile-an-hour wind load. We've done projects in Alaska that are over 100 pounds per square foot snow load. One of our biggest accolades is we did a 100-meter or 328-foot wide clear span building in Oslo, Norway. And that was a 70-pound snow load. So huge building, pretty heavy snow load. Some more of our structures. Lower photo is Southwest Airlines down in Atlanta. Upper right, I believe, is in Barstow. So this is the Norwegian Airlines hangar I was mentioning over in Norway. Huge structure, very heavy snow load. As you can see, they've got a vertical lifting fabric door there in the back, that 5-foot door. You may have also seen in some of our pictures that we do bottom rolling doors, Our company's focus to any building project is the building itself. We want to do a great job on the building, so we handle all the design and engineering work for the structure and fabrication of the structure. For big aircraft doors and other accessories like that, we'll actually purchase that from a door company or from a crane company, for instance. This is a project that we did down in Hawaii, originally started in 2012. You can see some of the construction photos, and if you look, you can see the truss versus the actual people, and it's just huge steel pieces that we're working with there. To see them in person, to believe how big they are, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I've got a couple more to show you. So this is finished product down in Hawaii. They've got maintenance hangar that you see on the right, and then the left-hand structure is actually a cargo sorting facility. So this was my first major aviation project at RUB. It's in Rockford, Illinois for AAR. This was the initial kind of design concept. Evolved into this, a little more refined, and then ultimately ended up after construction looking like this is our finished product here. So a little bit different than the initial design renderings. Some items were value engineered out through the course of the design process. We had worked with local architect and engineering firm to kind of help with all the interior shops and back office building you see here. So again, our focus is on our building, and we normally are working with designers locally to help with all the architectural stuff and office buildings, that type of thing. Interior shots. Now this structure right here is essentially the basis of design for what we're going to be doing with Ascent. So very similar in shape and size. The exterior will be a slightly different color, but very similar. They've obviously got two bays together here. In that middle space has got their office, shop space, employee restrooms, and break area, and everything in there. And this just shows you some of our other structures that we've done. Our counterparts over in the UK tend to do a lot of sport buildings. I think they're up to 4 or 5 Premier League soccer training facilities. You can see Newcastle and Sunderland pictured here. These are our buildings on the Portland, Maine waterfront. This is the building from 1984 here in the top right corner that I mentioned to you. And just some other strange things with how we do. Building to house the rocket for NASA. These structures actually accordion in and out of one another, and they're on a movable track system. Each of these things is about 130 feet wide, so very large structures. So we could kind of quickly transition. Did anybody have any questions they want to jump in, or?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. So here's some kind of preliminary layout drawings. I don't know if it's going to be small or not. See, this is essentially what we're working on right now. Very similar to those AAR hangars at Rockford that I showed you. Is that it's going to be one single bay instead of the 2 bays that I showed you in those pictures before. So we are progressing nicely on that. There should have a submittal stuff to Ascent next week. This was project and just kind of showing you interior, exterior pictures. Ascent Rockford. Some other interesting ones we've done. We did a big hangar for Turkish Technic over in Istanbul. So we do work all over the world, not just the US as well. And that is the Hawaiian Airline Sky. Will. So again, I said we're much different than our competitors in the space. Give you kind of some quick visual comparisons. One on the left tends to be what our competitors do, a little bit more temporary, sometimes more agriculturally focused. Our focus is on commercial, industrial, permanent projects. We're designing our buildings the last 20 plus years with no issues. You can see kind of the difference in how we make our connections, much more robust, huge steel pieces, everything uniform, neat, the way it's supposed to be, not kind of just haphazardly thrown together. Our competitors tend to just put cable where they think they'll work. Ours are all analyzed. It's a full analysis that we do. Integration is designed, transfer forces down to the foundation properly. See kind of our competitors, it's all over the board. There's some other fabric buildings. I don't know if you guys have seen some, but are all straight lines, all finished up neatly at certain node points here. It's a much more professional finish. We pride ourselves again doing things the right way and making them a long time. What you guys want me to show you any other pictures, or you guys want to ask me any questions or concerns that you may have, or?
Yes.
Sean, real quick, installation, construction, however you want to term it, is done by a RUB team that would travel here or not?
So it will vary by project. For the Ascent project, yes, it will be a RUB team. We install maybe 70% of our own buildings, so it's not a requirement that our guys install it, but many of our customers like that kind of peace of mind of having someone that's all they do is erect our buildings. But we also sell to a fair number of general contractors, and they'll sometimes just provide the labor, and we'll provide a technician from our factory to go out and assist them.
Will you need some local people to work on this? Or will?
On the Ascent project?
Yeah.
Yes. So our scope is just one little piece of the puzzle. The general contractor is going to take care of all the site preparation, foundation work, all the mechanical, electrical, and we'll come in and essentially just direct the steel and the fabric cladding.
How long is the process? How long is the process?
So it will vary by project and our own backlog. Obviously, right now we're very busy. The Ascent project, the last that I had discussed with them was a target date to start construction end of this year, November, December timeframe.
And to complete the project, the construction?
To complete the project, I expect that we'd be done by March. It's very fast on site. There's no welding needed, nothing like that. It's all just a bolt together frame system. And then the fabric itself comes in very big rolls. We essentially set those rolls on top of the steel structure when it's complete with a crane, and then those get unrolled with the help of gravity.
Would you use rail to transport any of the components, or you truck it?
I believe that our standard plan is usually over-the-road trucks. I know our shipping department, so we've got a few guys that all they do is arrange for our shipments. I know they look at a variety of modes of transportation depending on where the project is and everything. So I don't know definitively what their plan is for this project, but I think as of now, it's over-the-road trucks.
Okay. There is rail all the way into the air center. So if that's a viable option. If it's not, that's fine. I just threw that out there so you guys are aware of it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I will mention it to my team. I know that sometimes rail is like containerizing things and a little more handling on our end versus if we can just pick up the steel and put it down on a flatbed, it's a little less handling for us. But I'll check with my team and see if they can look into it.
Mike, you got any?
Yeah,
Do you know these guys?
you know.
We're talking Armstrong here. They're hiding over there.
Thanks, Sean.
I'm good.
I just wanted to comment on your good taste in sunglasses.
They're pretty snazzy. I like them. I seem to come home with a couple of pairs. My daughter likes them too.
We can arrange that.
All right.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Do we expect to see you out here
Any
sometime?
other questions, guys? Or
You expect to come out here anytime yourself or on site?
yes, at some point. I don't know exactly. My job is changing all the time. I'm in sales, but I got to stay on my toes, and sometimes I travel, and other times I'm here. I would say that I would definitely be out at least end of construction. Prior to the start of construction, I'm not sure. We may have like a pre-con meeting with Ascent and the general contractor, and I may or may not be involved depending on the schedule, but I'll let you guys know if I come out. I definitely want to.
Okay.
Are you gonna be in Vegas next month for AAA?
We don't do the big show, no. I'll be in Vegas for MBAA in October, I think it is,
Mike says he'll be there.
at MBAA.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I can come out really whenever. I've got pretty much free range to travel whenever. So if it would help or make sense at any point to come out, meet with either Armstrong, Ascent, general contractor, I'm more than happy to do it. So
Not yet, we'll talk to you, Sean, as we get the schematics all completed. Obviously, we'll shoot them to you to make sure everything looks good. And then if we need anything from you, we'll let you know.
sounds like a plan.
Okay. Good deal.
I don't think anybody else has any questions. I appreciate you taking time with us today, Sean, especially at the end of your day.
No worries. I appreciate you guys having me on and keep me posted. Like I said, happy to travel and help however I can along the way.
Okay, appreciate it very much.
Thanks,
All right, guys. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Yep.
Bye.
But
Train's 5:30 there.
Yep. Just in time for dinner.
Lobster.
Lobster.
All right, item number 10. This is a mulling. You and Mike and,
Kind of got us all in there.
yeah.
So I'll start just basically with the introduction and then hand it over to Mike. We kind of talked about this a little bit last month in terms of developing priorities for projects. And the timing is good because this is the time of year where we actually start doing that with the FAA. And that's what you have in front of you. If you don't have any of these, you should probably grab one. Easier, we'll have it up on the screen too, but it's easier to see. Judy, do you want? It's small print, and so it's better to hand them out too. But bottom line is, and Mike will get a little further into this, but we look 5 years out with the FAA, with the AIP funding, with the MAP funding, both of those, of course, are on the AIP project, or the AIP funding. And then, at least in one project in here, we've got a large amount of discretionary funding out of AIP as well. So in order to be orderly and planned and deliberate, this goes 5 years out. There's typically not much changing it. The first 2 years are pretty well set in stone. After that, there's a little more changing. But in general, what the FAA likes to see, the changes are not, okay, completely disregard this project and substitute another one. They may want you to move them around a little bit for priorities. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to go through all of these projects individually. For the new folks, I think I want to hand it off to you now and just let you talk about the process of how we get to this. And then we kind of go into the individuals a little bit later.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll just touch a little bit. I know there's a lot of new board members. And a while back, we did Airports 101. I was the first group that, when we first got to the airport. Together. One of the things Scott and I had talked about, one put together. And during that discussion, it was really pretty deep, just to educate everybody on how the funding starts with Congress, works its funnels its way down to, the federal under the DOT, right? Federal highways, rail, and transit, and then, the FAA. And how it funnels down and everything, how, it goes from 3.35 or $3.15 billion to Roswell. There's a lot of little things that have to happen, obviously, for everybody to get their money throughout, because the airports in our state, 62 airports, everybody's like, that's a lot. There's 62 airports in our state. So you think about Texas, oh my gosh, every town has an airport. So as you start looking at the whole fiscal process that has to occur on the FAA side for you folks to get your money, it's quite an endeavor. Start thinking about how it works and how the money funnels. Well, I want to do an Airports 101, the new group. I think that's one, and that's a whole different thing. And I don't want to get too involved in that particular time. Yeah, here's what we're here to talk about. But I think what everybody has to understand is it's not. It is kind of a wish list, but in a way, it's got to be a realistic wish list. So when this group starts looking at the CIP, you can't just throw a $50 million terminal and say, take that off. Not a realistic project. So it can be, and your mindset has to be, we always tell you, runway, taxiway, aprons. That's how the FAA looks at your. And when they look at the CIP, let's start real quick. Money wise, you folks get $1 million in entitlement money every year in your checking account. So that's a guarantee. You're going to get $1 million here. Public and airport. You get over 30,000, 35,000 a year. That qualifies you for that. There are airports that are Part 139 that are only time. Part 139, if you're commercial service, they don't have the entitlement. I mean, they don't get $1 million. They get $150,000. So you folks, you get your $1 million. You got big things out here. You got a lot of concrete. You got big runways. Biggest runways up in some part of the state. You guys have $1 million. Sounds like a lot of money. It doesn't go very far. What you guys have here, and to sit here and look at these numbers and you're just like, wow. You get the bottom on the CIP, you're asking them $49.2 million. That's what your CIP is. When you start looking at that, wow, the FA part, 5 point, and you start adding everything up, 5.6 on their end. Okay, so when you start looking at the cost of your need says 49.2, and that base says you're going to get 5.6. You start seeing where we're going. So the thing the FAA, when you folks look at this, is be realistic. Scott gets his 139 inspection. He just went through it. We talked about we have to fix it. We have the money call there, so do we got this money is set aside. One of the things we've always talked about here, and it gets me every time I hear the 139 guy coming, is last beats. I don't know, these paint to them is just like their thing. They physically will go out and say, this line is not 6 inches wide. Okay, my gosh. So little things like that are what we have to worry about. And it sounds really petty, but the last beats. And just real quick, just to put economy of scale in your minds, you guys are Part 139. You require like 3 class Bs. GA Airport Artesian, Lance down. You work with him. He's not a 139, he could put type 1 beads. Those beads, like 50 cents and $1 a pound. Paid his runway for $150,000. your beads, you guys are part 139. Do you require the type 4 glass beads? That means your reflectivity is higher. Those beads are $5 a pound. Now think of all the paint on this airport. It has to have that coated with glass beads. Your money just to mark the runway is going to go. So when you start thinking of, wow, this paint and beads, you guys are in a different class than a GA airport. So if you go and you talk to Lance and Archie and say, well, Armstrong said your glass beads were $1 a pound. He said, yes, they are. He's not a commercial service airport. He doesn't have a guy going out there at night putting the light and checking reflectivity like Scott has to do with his guy. So again, you guys play under different rules. Your stuff is get more expensive. It's just like having you guys are in a different little level here with commercial service. Your stuff's a little bit more expensive. You start talking about how the money trickles down now. Again, you get your million entitlement. Entitlements are key. You have $1 million every year guaranteed. You have that 35,000 claim payment number. That's where it starts. Okay, so if you're going to meet that, you meet those numbers that Scott should be on those employments. You're going to make. You start looking at, oh, we're going to make that number. Pretty critical. We'll have to start loading people on and start running them at the end if we're running short. We'll get a plane rented and we'll start doing that. But in all seriousness, those numbers are really key. The payments are looking really, really good. As far as the budget itself, when you start asking for anything over $1 million, now you go after a different pot of money. You have now moved into entitlement. And that other pot now, not entitlement, I'm sorry, discretionary. When you start going after discretionary money, now your project starts competing with other projects around the country. They line them up and they start ranking them. Your program manager is going to go and he's going to take it to Lacey, who's your ADU manager. And Lacey's going to take it to Ignacio, regional manager, and he's going to take it to Washington. And he's going to say, Roswell wants $3 million for a project. They're going to line them up. Everybody else, whether it's the Sunport, LAX, you name it, Guardia, they start lining your project up and they say, this is a safety item. This is a runway, first of all, the runway. Now the runway starts taking precedent. So LaGuardia says, hey, we need $10 million for our runway. You're asking for $10 million on April. I can tell you win. So that's a realistic thing. That's how it happens. So if everybody says, well, why don't we ask for $8 million? Be a really good project. So when you start looking at this, for example, I do want to do an airport. I think it'd be beneficial for everybody to see. We've got a whole bunch of new people, and I think it's something everybody needs to understand. It's just like it's your household. Everybody go to work. You have to balance checkbook. The FAA. So we can ask for $49 million. You're going to be competing for a lot of things with a lot of airports. So a lot of these projects on there are realistic. And when you start looking at them, you start thinking, it says runway, accurate. That's good. You guys that tells the FAA, one, you're paying attention to your payments. Two, you're 139 carriers. You know what? If they start coming in and they say, hey, the lights at Roswell aren't very good, or hey, the paint, the beads are kind of important. When it was raining the other night, and we really had to use the ILS and the tire really. That's not good. It's a safety issue, and that gets to be real. So keep in mind when you start looking at projects, when you go, especially when you start talking about hangars and things outside the fence, those are never, the FAA is not going to even entertain that. We're doing the parking lot with MAP funding. That's a whole different pot of money, different rules, different game. So that doesn't mean we can go crazy and use MAP money for everything. It's also rules. And the AIP handbook, and I've told this group before, the AIP handbook is kind of our rule. The program managers, when we start asking for things, they start looking to say, is this eligible at this airport? this eligible for this airport? And they'll go through it and they'll let us know. You can't do that. So when you put this together, and it's one of the things we have talked about, hey, fire trucks, hey, the fire chief comes and says, Scott, oh, we need a new fire truck. Again, we'll put it on there, but it has to qualify with the AIP handbook, or non-official. Not even the PM program manager can authorize a fire truck for the chief. The 139 official is the only one who can approve that truck. He's the safety guy. He's the only one who can say, yes, that truck is over this age. You bought the last truck on this date, so you're eligible to get another one. Your classification may have changed. If it has, then we'll look at it. So there's rules for everything. And it's just not something, I know the general said, yeah, it's a wish list. Yeah, it's a wish list. It's very specific and takes runway out, because when you start talking about, I want to do this, and, I want to, we can put it down. It's going to compete harsh. When you think about it, companies every other 139 airport in the country, but that's okay. LAX, LaGuardia, Atlanta, all those big airports, they go through the same thing. But again, they look at the passenger plane and how busy is the airport, how active is it, what are they doing? Is it growing? I mean, they don't just look at it, they actually look at it and not able to go and argue for your airport. And say, hey, Roswell's really got a lot of good things happening, their payments are up. They got a great runway. We just spent $30 million on the runway. We want to maintain it. And Roswell's looking to maintain it. Well, that's a good thing. So if we ask for 1.5 million to repaint the runway, that's going to compete really, really well. It sounds crazy, but paint will compete very well against other teams. So I just want to do a broad overview and say, before you dig into this, be realistic. Because during the meeting that we have with the FAA, Scott, and the state, they want it realistic, okay? And they don't want, as much as, if you look on the bottom, we always put, hey, so there's things on the bottom like parking phase 3, new hampshire construction. Those are just like places. So when they do the NIPIA shot, which we'll go over all that, all those terminologies later. But when they actually do a shot of your CIP and it goes into the federal system, they know that you're also looking at different, bigger things that you gotta maintain, which before we start doing anything crazy, they say, oh wow, that's kind of cool. They want to do a 42 death rate. Well, that's a good map project. Hey, do an apron expansion. Well, they got big things happening out there. But they also look at this and say, you're taking care of what has to happen. So yeah, without the framework, everything else starts falling apart, and that's not good.
You talked for just a second, you said map's a different animal. And you talk about how the priorities are different between the AIP, entitlements and discretionary versus the map, and how those priorities work out. That again, it is a weird animal.
It is a weird animal.
And so it's not necessarily the runway out.
So as far as the map goes, basically what happens is there's a pot of money, it's the entitlement money, and the airports that don't use their entitlement money, that money goes into discretionary, and that's where the discretionary projects come from. And then out of discretionary, the FAA saves 40% of that money for map projects. So it's an even smaller, tighter pot of money. But what it's used for is to take airports like Roswell from a military airport and to convert it into a civilian airport. So those are the projects that are going to compete well against that. Things that the military left here that need to be removed, or
I would point out our parking lot project,
Parking lot,
the
yeah.
first map project, is one that would never have been funded at all normally.
Yeah, yeah, again, when you get outside the fence, AIP money, yeah, it's not gonna happen. Those are the pots of money, for the AIP money. AIP money has specific rules and handle everything, and they like to keep that money on the airport, on the airfield.
That's why we're careful to pick projects when we put them into the different slots in here, what type of money is going to fund them, what type of project is best suited to that type of funding. So, Matt, for example, it's not runway center right now. It has a different focus with the military airport program grants. They're focused on converting from military to civilian. So a military airport doesn't have a terminal. It doesn't need all the parking for passengers. That's why it fits very well. It's a great conversion project. All right.
Actually,
Megan,
yes.
yesterday we talked a little bit about the BLM, the air tankers, and the potential for a new taxiway ramp space there so we can avoid the congestion over there by 10 or 85. So it's very preliminary, we just kind of very talked about it. But do we need to, or should, I mean, should we put something like that in? This is a taxiway apron thing, but it's an additional one. It's not a maintaining, is to improve a capacity. And where I'm going with this is, I get that the FAA won't necessarily fund it, but if we end up doing it is to help firefighting, could we get money from that side? Firefighters, whether it's Forest Service or BLM, get them to help with that or some other.
You know, we actually worked, we did the BLM tanks. So we got here in 2010. We actually, we designed the tank, designed that whole system, the fire flow system. And we worked with BLM to be able to pay for it. They did that whole project. So yes, the answer is yes, it can be done. We've done it. And you're right. You tell the FAA, hey, BLM, you're gonna do like your commercial service. Their priority is to make sure you're passing. When you start talking about government entities, and this is actually a good down on the border, we're going through this because they have the Forest Service there. You guys have actually have a Forest Service out of it. And with them, hey, we want to add some taxes. Not us. That's not our ticket. You know, it's on airport. They need to build it. Our money goes over there. That's rental. We're making money out of that. We're not doing anything. So in a way, they're hands off. The FAA doesn't, you know, even though it's a national protection agency, it doesn't apply. The FAA it's a need. They need to take care of it.
Do we need to make sure they know about it? Put it out there.
Absolutely.
Say, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
We understand you're not going to fund it.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. You are Part 139 airport, and you are different than on the board on that. Anything we do on the airport, we have to make sure we're paid. At least knows about it. Program managers are going and looking at the updated ALP after it's built, going, where did that get done?
okay. So what I'm starting to think about here is, okay, we're 139 scheduled air service airport, but in the overall scheme of things, we're an MRO airport. Probably more of our business is that than we do testing, whether it's Cessna or Boeing. You know, we're that way. So what I'm getting at is like we're a multifaceted, and you're not going to do, even if they had the runway, you wouldn't do brake testing at DFW.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to be honest with you. We built that runway. It's a great case in point. You just brought it up. We told the FAA we don't want to group the runway because then they couldn't do brake testing. The FAA said you need to prove that. We don't care about testing. Again, they told us point blank, our passengers come first. Testing, they didn't even care. They don't care who's using it for what. They said you have to demonstrate to us that you do not need it to be grooved, otherwise you will be grooving it. That's when we did the shot blast, and then we had it tested and proved to them and met the mission. And they allowed us not to groove it.
So, all right, so where I'm starting to chew on some stuff is that even though we're 139, wiped out DFW or LAX,
Competing with one.
we're competing with, but we're also, we do things they don't do. So we're an odd duck out. I mean, like, Marana and Goodyear are MRO in Victorville, but they're not 139.
So they don't necessarily, so Victorville is 139 cargo. They have no passenger service. So the rules, they mix a little bit, they're a little different.
Look, again, Ruidoso, they play by your rules. They have to use the expensive beads and they have to follow all the grading.
Right.
They just don't have service. They
And
don't
then,
get $1 million.
so what, so the firefighting guys, like, you know, what are they considered? Are they considered?
Government in,
They're
the
not,
FAA, they're not on their radar. They don't fund it. They don't, different agencies don't fund each other.
yeah,
They
but
tell them you need to find your money to build your tanker.
what I'm trying to think is that it's not 139 activity, it's not MRO. What is, does it have it there? Does it have a
The FAA, they're just a 10.
Yeah.
just a 10?
They're just a 10.
They're-
To them, it's no
We have-
different to the guys that have a 182 down the road. Down the nose of their ankle.
And I think, you know, Nippia's categories fall into it as well, and one that I'm involved with AAA, is trying to create a category for industrial airports. So like many of the airports Boeing are at, they're not commercial airports, but
Moses Lake.
Moses Lake, Moses Lake would be a good one. They don't have any commercial service part of it. They have to go to Spokane for commercial service. But yeah, Moses Lake's another good example. Victorville's a good example. The airports, Miami's a good example. All the airports that Boeing has factories at that don't have air traffic or commercial service, those are good examples that fall under the industrial airport category, which actually doesn't exist yet. It's a proposed category. Our group is working on it, trying to get a designation. And the point of that is because many of these airports have to build to the heavy and strong standards because of the airplanes that we have coming. Now, they're a little different because we mix, but the others don't. But they're still building these big, heavy runways, big, heavy planes. And so they want the FAA to recognize that, to support that industry as well, because it's key to the airline industry, it's key to the rest of the cargo industry, and so on and so forth. Because these are manufactured facilities, they're storage facilities, they're MRO facilities. All of the same things that we've been looking at and are chasing after. But right now, the FAA does not recognize that as a category of airport. It's something that they're considering.
So would that be instead of the 139 designation or like a
In
subset?
addition to,
So,
it would probably be in addition to, because it might not have to be 139, but it'd still be industrial. And that's one of the questions that's being considered as well. Will that fall under 139? Do we change the law under 139 to include industrial to create another category?
So 139, so who understands? It's meant for commercial service. When we talk about 139, it goes to the design criteria. When they say you're a 139 airport, standard as far as the gradient on the runway pavements. It goes to it starts getting into your master plan. You start looking at the aircraft that you use it. Your classification, how big is your safety or that? Where your light is supposed to be, what are you supposed to have for paint, what are you supposed to have for spacing? That's what they look at. And whether you're industrial, I mean, right now that's out there, but you are a general, you are a commercial service schedule. And to them, the MROs mean nothing, the LN mean nothing. I mean, if they're happy you have them, don't get me wrong, because they want you to be self-sustaining. So yes, that's a good thing. But it doesn't mean they're going to fund their
And they include cargo on 139, but they don't include funding for infrastructure, for cargo. So it's kind of an odd duck animal when it's a cargo facility. I mean, Memphis and Louisville are both, so that's not so odd for them. But you have another place, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but they might handle a bunch of cargo, where they've got to build a lot of the same type of infrastructure as the 139 airports do, but they don't get the AIP funding the same.
Ted Stevens,
What's that?
Ted Stevens, in Anchorage, because they do all the international cargo.
All right.
Why are we not using PFCs for any of the?
Well, for right now, we don't have a ton in it. We've got, I want to say around 300,000, a little more than in there. So,
Usually there's a bigger balance.
well, we have a huge balance in terms of what we can spend. Our authorization to spend the VSC is, God, I don't even know, it's still probably 1.5, 2 million, something like that, because it includes the runway 21 project.
Yeah.
The VSC that we put into that application. We still have 3 applications open, application 4, application 5, and application 6. 4 and 5 are partially dispersed, 6 hasn't been touched. It's the new one. And so we're not really at all, so I hate to dig into PFC too much because it's such a weird animal. Because it's hard to explain and hard to understand a lot of times because you have to have authorization to charge the ticket tax. And to do that, you have to have projects that qualify. So basically, the process is similar to what we're doing here to get projects, except that with PFC, you can have already done the projects, and then you get authorization through the PFC application to reimburse yourself for those projects. Anything that is applicable, or I'm sorry, acceptable under the AIP manual as an acceptable project is acceptable to use for the balance of PFC money. So it's kind of weird. You get that authorization for the application to charge the tax. The money comes into a bank account, and then you go back, and when you do a disbursement, you say, I want to move $300,000 out of my bank account into my operational account to repay on projects on that application, and you have to say how much you're taking out of each project. You may close the project completely, or you may take a portion out of certain projects until that application has been fully dispersed. That's why I don't like talking about it, because really.
Yes.
No, I've forgotten.
It's still $4.
$4.50. And there's been proposals in Congress for the last 3 years to go up to $8.50. I'm sure that'll continue to be cycled through the Congress.
Okay, it's almost 4 o'clock and I don't want to keep this going because we haven't talked about next month's activity, but let's just do that online and come back to that. One of the things I'm also curious about, and I don't mean to talk about it now, but I think one thing is this additional COVID-related money, what's it mean for the air center? Like I say, this is not the time because it's already 4 o'clock. Let's put that on the agenda because there's talk now another infrastructure bill. And we got some of this rescue plan.
You know, we've gotten CARES money. We've gotten what's the other one, Chris? And then there's a third one that we haven't touched yet.
The rescue.
Yeah, the rescue money. So that's what it's Airport Rescue Grant is what it is, ARG. FAA hasn't even begun to talk to us about that yet. But we expect those monies will be similar to the others. So it's 1.2 million on the first grant, a little bit over 1 million on the second grant. We're expecting about the same on the third. And as well as some concessionaire money as well, which we also got with
Okay.
so
Let's talk about that next month. Okay.
let's do.
Because like I said, it's 4 o'clock and I know everybody's busy and full day. So unless there's an urgent need to discuss something else, I'm going to go ahead, adjourn us and have everybody feed you proposed topics for July. Okay, sound good to you? Okay.
The only thing I want to mention is there's a timeline on this for the FAA. So we're working with the CIP stuff right now with the FAA. We wanted to make you guys aware of it and kind of talk you through the process a little bit of how we get to this. But, there's a little bit of wiggle room in here, but there's not a lot because of the priorities that we have to listen to. And basically, I don't know if I'm really looking for a blessing, but at least an understanding that you guys have. So that, we will move forward with this if there's no objection.
Yeah.
I'm the only deal on it.
There was a motion bless.
Oh, yes.
And senior. This here by bless. All right. Very good. It's 4:01. We'll call it adjourned.